Thank you, Tony. That's such a weird voice, that recording in progress. All right. Well, great to see some familiar names and faces and some new ones. Thank you all for calling. I think we'd probably all appreciate if you would turn your cameras on. I realize people might have other things going on or whatever. You don't have any pressure on that, but the more we can kind of feel like we're all hanging out in the same space would be great. I'm Tom Douglas with the U.S. Army Cold Regions Research and Engineering Lab in Fort Wainwright, and I'm one of the co-leads of the Risks and Hazards group at IARPIC. And we're really excited today for this presentation. So this is kind of a bit of a speaker series we put together for winter, spring 2026. The goal would be to connect community who are developing tools and data sets and support communities affected by hazards. And then, of course, opportunities, collaborative spaces, ideas, data sharing, et cetera. And we're working on scheduling more people. And I guess if any of you either wanted to self-nominate or have someone you might want to recommend, let us know. We have a pretty big list we're working through, but we could always appreciate more. So today we're really excited to have Christine Langley with the Office of Data Modernization and Innovation Director with Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities. She's going to talk about DOT's 2025 West Coast Storm Response, GIS system that's key to those efforts, and sort of some discussion about establishing common operating pictures for federal, state, community, and travel partners. So a really cool topic. She's going to speak for about 30 minutes or so. She's going to drive the slides herself, which is great because I'd probably mess that up if I tried to help. And then we do want room for Q&A. I think if you had a pressing question and want to throw it in the chat as we're going, maybe please don't spam that. But if it's clearly for a certain slide or whatnot, hopefully Christine's okay with that. And then, of course, sometimes people kind of do some discussions on the chat as things are going. Realize the speaker may not see that, but you're welcome to share information that way too. Maybe that's one positive thing of us not being in a room together, as we can kind of send some info back and forth, and Christine will catch up on that later. With that, thanks again, Christine, for this presentation today, and I will turn it over to you. And thanks, everybody.
Okay, thank you very much. So as Tom said, my name is Christine Langley. I'm with the Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, and we have been involved and are still involved in the West Coast storm response. So while this presentation is going to be a lot of information really quickly, I do want to, always remind everybody that this is not an event that is over, and so this is a status update on things we've developed to date. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, I'm not going to share that screen. So hold on one second. I practiced this and still, we're going to share that screen. How's that?
That looks good.
All right. Okay, so we'll go ahead and jump right into it. One of the questions that we get a lot is why DOT? Why was DOT so involved in a typhoon response effort? And while many people see DOT as the folks that are out there plowing the roads, or potentially, depending on your opinion, the folks that put a construction zone in your way of getting to fishing this weekend, we do a lot in Alaska. And so we are land, air, and sea. We run nearly 12,000 lane miles of road. We have over 200 rural airports that we're responsible for. We have 16 harbors, 9 vessels. We move 6 million passengers just through our international airports. We move 53,000 vehicles on our ferries. We manage the state equipment fleet, which is over 7,000 pieces of equipment. And on this map here, you can see all of those dots, and this isn't even every one of them, but it shows how many places DOT has staff, resources, equipment, and is invested in those communities. And so that means that many times we're already out there. We either can tap into people who are local to that area, or we bring with us this very large contracting ability. Because we move millions of dollars annually in construction projects, we have a full suite of folks that are ready and prepared to deploy contracts in emergencies. And that paperwork part becomes very important. So this is a shortened timeline for Typhoon Halong, and I won't read it all to you, but you can kind of see through those dates. This moved very quickly, and so because of Merbok, we had a good idea that what was coming was going to be worse, and we knew Merbok was bad enough. And so we very quickly started standing up our ICS infrastructure internal to DOT. We started getting our resources on board. Where we could, we went ahead and sent out drone operators and pilots to get an idea of what was going on prior to the storm. And then we started moving through building out these structures kind of as this change occurred over time and our understanding of the situation got better. And again, I can see from some of the folks that I see on screen that many of you are familiar with what it means to be in rural Alaska or Western Alaska. But one piece that I really wanted to set the stage for is that when you think about emergency response for an area or a community that is off the road system, you're talking about, no access to Lowe's, right? There is no Walmart, there's no very large grocery store, you're not grabbing something from Costco. And so when you are set up in a situation where you expect only seasonal barge access, where anything beyond that is coming in through a rural airport and a regional hub, you're set for winter, right? And so you expect to be able to make it with the supplies that you have on hand. And once we start talking about rapidly changing those dynamics, that's a very large impact on individuals and communities. Because of when the typhoon hit, early October, we were in that transition season between fall and winter. And as many of us who recreate in the north know, there's that time at which it's great to be out on your bike, and then you have to wait a while until it's great to be out on your skis. And so we were really in that kind of transition period as far as transportation in rural Alaska goes. So when we started to assess how we were going to respond, we started to look around and we realized that in most communities, the barges had already been pulled out of the water. And what that means is they're not just physically tied up and somebody could go, crank up that engine, restock the fridge, and away they go. They're physically out of the water. They're sometimes disassembled, and the crews may have gone back to their home community or to some other location or job that they have during the winter season. Many of the individuals had, chest freezers and dried goods, and they were all stocked up for the winter. Those items are highly valuable and not easy to replace. We knew that while the docks were not frozen at the moment, we only had a week to 2 weeks to respond, and those docks would be frozen. And so we did recruit as many barges as we could. We brought them up from Homer, we brought them up for Seward, but that's a long trip up to the West Coast, and we knew they may not be able to get in by the time they got there. Dropping temperatures is hard to work in, and so it has that I need to pack different clothes aspect, but it also means batteries don't last as long, equipment starts to break faster, and there's decreased visibility and flight time due to increasing darkness every day. And so these were, things we all know, but all of a sudden became very important to how we were going to develop a response. The other items that we were faced with is there was a very limited number of charter flights available. And so everyone was attempting to come in, us, the military. This fills up the flight zone area and makes it dangerous to operate drones. They are aerial vehicles. We have to follow certain regulations. And it meant that anytime we went out, we needed to do our best to get a flight, work with other entities so that we could fill every seat on that plane or chopper, and then make sure that we always had a spotter to provide safe operations within that airspace. We wanted to ensure that we did not impact the communities further. So we didn't want to take up their beds. We didn't want to eat their food. We didn't want to impose in any way that was going to make the situation harder. And part of doing that is we didn't want to bring in a whole lot of people, right? We've got specialists in bridges and erosion and seawall mitigation. We didn't want to bring all of those individuals. We wanted to find a way to put the fewest number of people on the ground, collect the most information we could, and get it back to experts that were not impacting the community. Okay, so we realized as we went through this process that we were some of the first people on the ground, and that meant that what we went in with on day 1 was not what we had to do by day 5. And throughout the course of it, we started developing more tools. We had an increasing audience as we brought in more tribal partners, the federal government, as we escalated through this emergency. And by the end, we knew we had handed out accounts to over 300 people. And so that's a lot of individual skill sets and questions to take into account. So we started setting up a way to operate remotely. On the lower left, you can see 1/2 of our EOC. Those are all designers who are getting ready to do cost estimates. We wanted to make sure that we were getting all this information for ourselves and for everyone else. And by doing it in this manner, in which we pulled in all this information, we created a common operating picture, and we offered this data back out, we really were able to reduce that duplication of effort. So between us and another entity, they may say, we need to test the water in this community, and we brought out those water testing kits and we ferried back those results. And that, again, went towards decreased impact on the local resources that were available, but increased information. In general, when you have a disaster in the contiguous United States, you have a tornado come through, it's going to cross many different counties, boroughs, cities, and potentially states. And there's homeowners who have access to their home after a certain amount of time and can work with FEMA. Because we had mass evacuated staff, I'm sorry, I appear to have an automated progression on here. Because we had mass evacuated individuals, they were no longer there to represent their own home and community. And this is a very hard thing for FEMA to grasp. They expect a homeowner to fill out a form and to assess their own damage. And we needed to work with them to, one, be willing to accept electronic records. Nobody's filling out a piece of paper, and these individuals weren't there to do it, and we needed to be able to do it for them. And this is a big change to FEMA, but one that they have now accepted and they expect to be able to use in other events after this. The other piece that was important is Alaska building style is different than they're used to, right? And so when you talk about damage to a home and you're looking at a picture post-flooding, floods take everything away, and that includes the damage sometimes. And so we needed to sit down with them and say, do you see how the electrical utility service used to be attached to this house? Well, it's not, and therefore they don't have electricity anymore. This fuel tank has become separated. This is the outline you see on the wall. No fuel, no heat. The other one that was very important was elevated building styles. And so we needed to help them understand that if the insulation underneath your subfloor is saturated and it is now frozen, your house is inside of a chunk of ice, and that's not a livable situation. There was many times that they assumed those were cosmetic damages, and it took a lot of meetings and a lot of discussion to say, no, if you lose even a third of the insulation in your roof, a tarp does not cut it. That's not going to get you through winter. So this is a short list of things we developed over time. We started listing them out and realized, oh, that's an entire list in itself. But we'll go through a few of those today. These are GIS folks could talk about these forever and be in the nuance, but I'll try to go over the reasons that we did them, how they were developed, and the benefits that we saw. And it is our intent to share all of these when we're ready. So this common operating picture that we talked about really became that we need one website to find it all. And so we developed AI-assisted addressing. Many of the communities have no need for traditional addressing, or what some of us perceive to be traditional addressing, I guess. And so it was hard to speak and make sure we were talking about the same resource. We needed to aggregate this data as fast as we could to help give an understanding of the scale and the impact, and to get towards those federal disaster declarations that we knew were the method for unlocking money for the communities. We were sending individuals in who were not familiar with that location, and so we needed to provide them a way to see what they should expect when they were on the ground. Quite often when they landed, their only mode of transportation at that point was to contact a community leader and hope someone could come over with a four-wheeler and drive them around the community. So they didn't necessarily know, is the sewage lagoon to the right or to the left? Boardwalks were missing. They were not able to get everywhere. But if they stayed on the runway, they needed to at least know which direction to send that drone to get that imagery. We then needed to rapidly create the cost repairs. In a disaster, there's very short relative timelines, 30, 60, 90 days. They go by very quickly. And if you are not ready to spend the money is not accessible. And so that became very important for us to get that done as fast as we could. We used a lot of orientated imagery, meaning imagery that not only showed us the picture, but it told us which direction the photo had been taken in. And I'll show why that's important as we go along. And then because we were in the ground and we're talking about over 50 communities, just understanding what was going on became important as well. Do they have, has their sewage lagoon overflowed? Is the runway lights running? Is the runway in good shape? Do they have boardwalks? What's the power and drinking water situation in each town? And who can you call that's still there? So the first piece that we did, we sent out teams of 2. One of them had a drone, one of them was there to help. We took FEMA's original infrastructure damage assessment tool and we built a smaller one. Again, towards that idea of a tornado crossing 3 states. We knew every person was in Alaska. We didn't need to ask them to fill it out. We knew they were there for a typhoon. We knew we were looking at water damage. And we shortened a significant amount of that survey. And we allowed them to just rapidly fill it out and move on. Because sometimes they were only on the ground for 45 minutes. They also could do speech to text, because as we all know, as it gets colder, it gets harder to accurately, write something out on your phone. And we disseminated these tools via QR codes to the public so that individuals could help and we could start to crowdsource what that damage looked like out there. We brought them into dashboards so we could see real time what was going on. And in this particular case that's on the screen here, this is how we were having our staff check in. So we built a similar item and we just said, hey, we know that you might not have communication, but we want to know who's in the chopper with you, when you're going to land, where you're going to go next, how many bodies are on board, and if you need anything, we need you to tell us. And so this dashboard shows that. And our staff got into it. We had check-ins from pizza joints and we had check-ins from people's houses, and we had all sorts of things, I think, just to check that we were paying attention to them. But it allowed them to tell us we need more batteries, we need more clothes, this community doesn't have water and someone needs to call them, that type of thing. So the next piece we did was build out these community maps, and they have points of interest both from a DOT infrastructure side, which in a rural community is usually the runway, and they had information like the school, if the community operated off of a sewage lagoon, where was it at? And could we check the status of it for DEC? We knew where their power systems were, and we knew where most of their roads or board roads were. We made these in a format that could be printed or viewed digitally because we didn't really know who was going to need them and what condition they were going into, because a whole lot of digital resources with no connectivity still doesn't do you any good. So that infrastructure assessment I was talking about, this is actually its dashboard. I think I misspoke earlier. These started coming in from the public, from our partners, and from DOT staff, and we started to be able to get a sense of the scale of what was going on out there. And this helped us really realize that, one, we were spinning up an in-state emergency response, and now we needed to start talking to the feds as a state to spin up the ultimate federal disaster declaration. In general, when DOT goes in, we think that we're looking at our own individual infrastructure side assets. Once we were on the ground and we realized how limited the access was and how big the impact was, we knew we needed to start helping out and look at homes. And this is a stretch from where DOT usually is, but again, as Alaskans always are, we're here to help each other. And so, with the authority from the governor, we were able to then shift our resources towards helping with home assessments. We did a similar thing for the home assessments, and you'll see the video, I think, play there on the right. And it kind of just shows how quickly you can pinpoint the location that you're at. It will fill in a lot of those other details, like what your physical address might be, if there is one, what your community, your borough, your state is. On the left, you can see some of those reports come in. I think this shows 1.3 thousand, but I think we had more than that by the time we were done. And they were throughout all of these communities. When you're in the field and you're going as fast as you can, you might not articulate the damage as well. We got ones that just said, John's house floated away. And that isn't enough to fill out a FEMA form or to actually back that statement that this is destroyed. And so we trained a large language model on the FEMA categories, and we started running those against the photos. And it did take some work because in general, a typical home, maybe in Colorado, looks very different than a home in rural Alaska. And so we had to start addressing some of those things like, whether the paint was according to a standard LLM in good shape or not was different where we live than where someone else might live. And we worked through that, but it added a lot of context and helped back some of those ratings. And FEMA was willing to accept this extra information, not in lieu of our information, but extra information. I think, there we go. Okay. So this is the community status update that we started to build. This was how we started to get access and information on the communities and for all those other resources. So we gave this part to the public, and then we had a crew of people operating out of Bethel who were starting to upload this information, and they would reach out to the communities. They'd find the tribal contact that they could work with. They would get information on the needs of the community. Were they out of water? Were they out of food? What could we help ship them as fast as we could? And then we started also keeping track of, had we done enough, drone work in this place? Had we moved on to taking home assessments? Who was out there working at this moment? Because this was really a collection of many different people who were helping. All the tables in the world don't give you an idea of what it looks like on the ground. And so we realized that we needed to help convey that message of what it is when houses move 5 miles from where they started. And when you don't necessarily know what to expect, right? It's hard to know what you didn't know before. So we built this imagery comparison tool. And on the right, you'll see the image pre-storm, and on the left, you'll see the post-storm. And as it works its way back here, and tell me if it's not viewable, but the slider should be moving back and forth, and we're going to zoom in a little bit more. This flood was effective, and so it washed not just most of a house away, it washed all of the house away. And then you're back to that situation of, yes, I can see there's a depression in the ground, but was there something there? And this gave us that ability to articulate to community leaders, state government, and federal government, just the level of the devastation that we were talking about and how much was entirely missing. So the next piece of information we realized we did not have or did not quite have correctly is that orthomosaics, which are stitched together drone flights, create an aerial view from the top down. And while we could see that things were not looking well from the top down, there was even more that our folks who were on the ground were reporting back to us that we could not see from the aerial imagery. And let's get this one to play here. Here we go. So on the left, you can see that we started to tag up aerial imagery with on-the-ground imagery using GoPro 360s. And a GoPro 360, you can think about kind of like Google Street View. So you can hop into that board road or that community, and you can do a 360 pan. And we tracked where everyone went so that we knew exactly how to jump back in. If a community, if Quig called and said, what's the status of our sewage lagoon? One of us sitting in Anchorage could hop in there and figure that out for them. On the left, I'm going to pause it for a second here. So on the left, you see this, what appears like it could be a roof. It's an intact roof of a building. And from an aerial imagery shot only, you would not know that it's actually a building on its side. And that became very important to us because we needed to articulate that fact that things that looked intact from the air were not intact once you were on the ground. And tying these two together was a new piece that had not been done before by Esri or by the drone vendors, and definitely kudos to all of the folks who were involved because they helped us develop this technology as we went on. Right. So the next piece was that getting the money flowing. And we developed this design tool that aggregated, it brought in all of that imagery, it brought in those comparison tools, and it brought in the information on the ground. So when our staff were out there doing infrastructure assessments, the app that they had allowed them to circle areas. This tool allowed them to calculate volumes of, missing retaining wall or how much of the road has washed away. From here, we could then export that data into large collections of work authorization. So we could say, okay, we're going to do a tentative work authorization for the community of Eek, and we see this much damage, we value it this much, and then that would roll up to the state EOC and subsequently FEMA to say, will you fund us to move forward with this? And as soon as we had that, we could then get contractors on board, resources on their way, and get them out to the communities.
Christine, may I jump in just really quickly? There was a question about where did the imagery come from you used for the comparison tool? And before you moved on, I want to just jump in. Thank you.
Yep, no, that's a great question. If you wanted to get aerial imagery of Houston, you'd be in good shape, but you'd probably find it from yesterday. That is not the case in Western Alaska. And so we used items that we had already. We then used a clearinghouse that's offered by Esri, which just basically is a shopping cart for every satellite imagery company that's out there. And we started to find whatever we could that was most recent. And we had staff that had been or worked on projects in these communities, and they would come back to myself and my team, and they'd quickly say, I know there's 3 more buildings in here. This imagery isn't good enough. And so then we would go look for something that was newer. It wasn't perfect, right? And it didn't have everything, but it definitely was enough to help us make that message clear. And then
Thank
the
you.
post imagery is all stuff that we flew, generated, and compared with.
Thanks.
So once we got out there, we had to actually be able to articulate who was working on what home. And again, towards that, FEMA expects me individually to put in my claim, and I would submit my receipts from going and buying a bundle of insulation at Spenard's, or I would submit my receipt for having a contractor come in and do work. Here, there was no one in these communities anymore, or some of them. And they weren't livable situations where individuals could go and stand there watching a contractor do the work on only their house. We were sending in bunks of plywood. We bought out treated timbers from Alaska. We moved into Canada. We started buying them from the lower contiguous 48 states. We were moving in genuinely tons and tons of material on a regular basis. And they were used for any house. And so we needed to make very sure that the contractor could tell us, I worked on house number such and such, and here's a photo from today of what I did. The other thing that was going on, and ABCP has done a lot of work on putting house numbers on some of the communities that they are involved in. We needed to make sure that we were speaking the same language as them. And by assigning these numbers using AI and identifying the polygons, we were able to make that crosswalk and make sure that we were all talking about the same place at the same time. We then built another tool using Quick Capture, and Quick Capture is an Esri product that grabs orientated imagery. And if you look at the top section here of the slide, this orange triangle and the arrow that originates it shows you where that individual was holding that phone or iPad or computer and the direction they were taking the picture. As it got colder, our staff told us even more. We can't answer this many questions. We can't get our hands out of our gloves fast enough. Our batteries are dying. We don't know what to do. And so we started setting up a situation where all they had to do was take a picture. And with that orientated imagery, we could then go back and identify what house they were talking about. And so we asked every contractor to take an image when they were done for the day, or even when they started, whatever they wanted to share. And we were able to work with FEMA to say, while an individual might not produce this, we are going to give you every single photo that came from this house, and you'll be able to see that plywood went in, insulation went in, shingles were put on the roof, metal siding is there, whatever it would take to help that individual get that money back. We started bringing all of these in with the daily work report so that we could ensure that the money was going. And then by having this automated or orientated imagery and assigning it to houses, you will notice some of those dots don't come in the right spot, right? And so this didn't get perfect for us, but it's one we're still working on. We were able to then run reports that did the initial damage assessment for that home and every subsequent entry after that. And FEMA has said that that is an acceptable item. And again, because we know homeowners are not out there, we have made it so that the community can download those reports, or individuals can ask us for everything we see on house number such and such. This is people's worst day, right? And I think probably everybody or many of us have seen the images that came out. We did not share a lot of the images that we were collecting. They included coffins floating. They included oil slicks. They included again, people's worst day. This was not public information in our mind at all. This was sensitive information that we needed to keep safe. And so we set up a strategy of structured groups for who could edit, who could view, and then we only allowed sharing and visibility to tribal entities, members of community organizations, federal and state partners. We did get a lot of requests from groups who just said they wanted to help out. Can I see the data? And in every situation, we said, you have to go back to that community, you've got to talk to them, and you've got to get somebody there to vouch for the fact that you should have access to all of this imagery. Down there in the right, actually, you can see some of the members of my core team. That woman on the left, Faith, she developed a lot of these tools for us and has subsequently presented on it many times. This was done by many people and in cooperation with many people. So this is as many logos as we got on one slide, and while it covers many, it does not cover all of the groups that helped us. But we want to thank every one of them. We think that this has really moved Alaska forward and FEMA forward. They agreed they will forever basically take Alaskan assessments of our homes as opposed to the wonderful individuals who they were bringing in, but were from North Carolina and New York and other places that were not familiar with how we live and what we need to make it through the winter. And then also, we learned a lot of skills in how to handle mass evacuation. How can we communicate as a state? We met a lot of our partners that we really weren't ready to work with, but we will be next time. And as much as we all hope there isn't a next time, there probably is. So that is the end of my slide deck.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
happy
Christine. Yeah, lots of clapping. And there's some nice comments. A couple people left some really nice kudos in the chat. So, and I think why don't we encourage at this point folks to ponder questions. And I guess since I have the floor for right now, I'll ask one and others can think about theirs. You started by saying you sort of learned a lot from Merbach. When the next one happens, and I don't think we're going to say if anymore, right? What else have you learned? And I don't want to say like what went wrong or what are the lessons learned, but like what might you think would change if and I guess when the next one comes? And thanks a lot.
So one of the pieces that we've already started to do is this whole suite of tools that you see here is full of this data. And so we are building out a framework that just starts off with enter your emergency here. And then this tool set is ready to go. We were training these contractors and our staff as they came in, and that was a lot of work. And if they get out to that remote location with limited comms and they don't know how to use the tools, that becomes difficult. And so eventually we developed a very handy card that has the QR code and the instructions and make sure your drone is set to this. Next time we will have that ready to go and ship that kit out. Comms was still our hardest piece. And so while we were connecting up multiple Starlinks, we were using live view backpacks at the end. All of this rolled in over time. And our primary data communication method became Alaska Airlines Goldstreak. And those hard drives got dropped off and they routed back and someone ran to pick them up. But that still caused basically a 24-hour delay in getting that data into the hands of the people who needed it. And so that's one where we know we have to find a solution that's better than that.
Thank you. I see David Allen has his hand up, and if others either want to raise a hand or you can throw something in the chat, we'll kind of moderate that way. Thanks.
Hey, so first off, I just wanted to say amazing, absolutely amazing work. Everybody's saying it in the chat, but really quite impressive. But I wonder too, you had to reconstruct a lot of materials given where communities were. I wonder whether this is going to motivate some kind of larger preparedness initiative in rural Alaska in general to maybe help communities crowdsource a lot of the resources that you had to reconstruct from satellite imagery and beyond, so that people can be at least, God forbid that such disasters happen, but at least be prepared in advance to have some kind of cataloging and accounting of their possessions and the configuration of their property, etc. Thanks.
Yeah. So there was actually a change to FEMA's rules that happened July 1st, and Alaska got to be the first emergency after it happened. And that was the first time that FEMA actually said subsistence tools and resources are valuable possessions that can be replaced. And that meant people could submit for their boat, their fish camp, all these other individuals. And, we'll see how that rolls out, right? Like just because it's said doesn't mean the check's going to arrive, and that takes time. I think, one, we need better imagery to start with, and I think we can work towards that. One of the things that is unfortunate and was very hard on a lot of our people, not that that's the sole metric of that, but it was one we saw is money comes with restrictions. And so many times those restrictions really hampered what was there. And so this idea initially of all you're doing is patching it together, we were able to stretch to, okay, well, patching it together in October doesn't mean a tarp over your roof with no insulation. It means I need insulation and I need plywood and I need tar paper and I need metal siding. And so we were, I would say, able to help stretch that money a little bit further so that they may be in slightly better shape, but in no way is that going to prevent what's going on. There was a lot of discussions about communities that maybe wanted to move, and that's where it got difficult in that the funding streams, which DOT does not dictate and the state of Alaska do not dictate, only covered certain things. And so those are great conversations to have and we need to have, but they weren't necessarily decisions that DOT had the right to make or to act on in the moment. And that became hard to handle, but is necessary.
Thank
We
you. So
did
we have
discuss that
oh, sorry.
gravel needs to be stockpiled in a lot of locations. That to barge gravel in is highly inefficient. You cannot haul much. And so that was one that I do think that we have found ways to potentially fund in upcoming projects, that every single project leaves a pile of supplies in a community for the next, because we need that runway back in good shape in order to land that very first plane, and we need to have resources there to do it.
Thank you. So let's see, there's a hand up, but for just a sec, because this dovetails off of what you just said. Jane Pierce, did that answer your question? To me, it seems like the low tech thing is lots of gravel. The high tech thing is better ways to share data. That's two pretty broad ends of the spectrum, right? But did that address your question, Jana, before we move on?
Yeah, that and the better imagery. Yeah, just thinking of things that communities can do now over the next while before the next thing hits to make this amazing effort that you rolled up even smoother for you.
Cool. And I'm not sure, please forgive the pronunciation. Kana, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, my name's Kana Chakiak.
Kana, sorry.
It's okay. I'm in New I'm from Kotzebue, Alaska, but I'm calling in from Virginia Tech here where I work. This was so cool. This is I mean, it's a sad, it's a sad reality. Kotzebue was also hit in a very different way. And, being here, trying to like see what's going on with like my mom and my sisters, and, just making sure that like thinking about our family home has been stressful the last few years. But I have not been there during those impacts. And I've also haven't had to deal with the fallout or the anxiety, the same kind of anxiety level as this fall season, where the ice used to protect us, does not anymore from these storms, comes in. And so I have a two-pronged question, and these are, I guess, secondary uses of this data that you have. So just thinking about creating opportunities for communities, because just like everyone was saying, I work with, I have a community partner who's like, can you help us with a incidents command? Like, how do we prepare for this? Because they need water samples before, during, after, all these different things. And like in Kotzebue, for example, and this is getting to my point with a secondary use of data, but thinking about, a lot of these communities don't even qualify for flood insurance for their homes to protect their own investments in the interior parts of their homes versus the exterior parts of their homes. So like beds, various things. And also, what comes up with the flood is also sewage and various other things that ruin personal items, in particular, and cause all sorts of disruption. But thinking about secondary use of data for so communities can qualify for things like flood insurance, because Kotzebue doesn't flood, is so my sister couldn't buy flood insurance for her house that has, every year she's this far from it going into the house, right? And it's pretty scary. And then the second thing I'm thinking about, and it's not going to be applicable or easy for other communities, but the use of this data and this information that you have to help advocate or to help communities to advocate for evacuation sites. So when these storms happen in November, October, as you can tell from the commentary, it's cold. In Kotzebue, we don't have any infrastructure that is up on the tundra, right, away from the spit that we're on. And we have roads going out to those spaces, but where there's nowhere to go. So you're, potentially just evacuating to your car. And we're lucky because we have a high ground to go to, and all of these communities have not. And so I'm just thinking about also just thinking like using this information to advocate for evacuation sites. And even if they're multi-use evacuation sites that are just for evacuation, but can serve some sort of a community need. And so that's just my call for use of this type of data that so clearly demonstrates the needs of communities, but also those secondary uses of data that could help for further, helping communities. Thanks.
So I think, because it was 50 communities, there was some generalizations you could pull out on which ones were more significantly damaged than others. And there was pieces you could see. And I'm going to make this statement, I do my part, right? I don't see the whole picture all the time, but there in a community where the runway was slightly higher than the next community, they still had an active runway on day one, whereas we had to fix the one in the other community. And so I think there is some ways that we could start as Alaska to look at where do we put our federal dollars so that we get that secondary benefit that you're talking about. Maybe when we talk about where a runway and an airport goes in a community, we all start to consider that a little further away might be the better location, annoying day to day. But when that event comes, if it's even 5 feet higher in elevation, it can be significantly different in the level of damage that occurs. And I think that would be one way that we could tap into existing funding that the state gets and provide that secondary benefit. We do know we need to share this data eventually, but we want to be very respectful of the communities that it represents. And so I think we will get to that place where we do, because it will be valuable for further research, but we're not quite there yet. And we need to start that conversation. As a slight tangential piece, another area that I work on in the department is our research funding. Research needs to be surface transportation focused. We are opening the call for research projects for the next 2-year cycle right now. It is approximately $3.5 million pool of money that we have to do that. And this is a massive amount of data that would be wonderful if someone took a look at. Runways don't qualify as surface transportation, right? But I think there's a research project for someone or some graduate student here for sure.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. A couple comments sort of about communities. Let's see, David Allen had one. I don't know if it's a question or a comment. There's no question mark, but it says it would be essential to have an integrated government approach for broader discussions. That's one of those things that sounds fantastic now, but of course, when something happens, things get crazy. But maybe comments on that. And then Jeff Curry also sort of mentioning basically just coordination across communities. And Jeff, I don't know if you mean different communities like federal, state, tribal, blah, 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 or if you mean different communities like physical communities, but probably either one. I guess any thoughts on the coordination piece, Christine?
We did, as Kana mentioned, rough way to learn this, right? But we did learn a lot from this and who we could work into. For example, the state SEOC did not know the capacity of DOT or did not know that they could specifically task us, and that we own a very large suite of Esri GIS-based tools, and we have people who run them, and they can be requested and moved into an emergency operation. They now know that. The other one that we have found just in looking at DOT, there's an emergency all the time, whether it's erosion, runway lights, something. Our state is big enough, we've always got something. We know that we need to implement an actual EOC type of software so that we can start to deploy our own resources instead of annoying 50 people in a Teams chat that I should not have called at 2 a.m., And so we've been talking with the state SEOC on how do we all use the same thing so that the moment I need to work with AVCP, we're speaking the same language and the same software. And while that can't be mandated today, DOT, just due to its size, I am hoping we will kind of step up to that plate first, and we will say, this is the application we've bought. We already know there's 4 other government entities, local or community entities in the state that have bought this similar software suite. And we're just going to hope everybody joins us. And we're going to kind of crowdsource this from the bottom up, I think, as opposed from the top down, because there's enough of us now that realize, oh, this is inevitably coming again.
That's great. Any last, maybe one more question or comment, and I'll probably turn it over to Tony at the very end. But Christine, we do appreciate your expertise and your time, and I'm sure maybe throw your email in the chat if other people have you got them fired up and they want to contact you again. So, could a last call on a question or a comment? All right, there you go. Thank you, Christine. Okay, with that, Tony, do you want to do a final wrap up? And thanks everyone for your time today.
Sure, yeah, and I'll just put in the chat again, just a reminder that this meeting today was recorded and will be available later this afternoon. So I know there's, a lot of interest from folks who are here today. Christine was a wonderful presentation. So just to know that if there's anyone you know who couldn't make it today and you want to forward along the recording, it will be available later on this afternoon. As well as Tom said at the beginning of the call, we are scheduling some additional presentations, panels, as part of the Risks Team speaker series into the spring. We are finalizing some details, so there's nothing upcoming on the site currently, but we're working on it behind the scenes. But just for anybody who's not a member already, I put a link to request an account to ARPA collaborations where that information will go up as it's finalized, so you can be part of more discussions like this. But otherwise, I guess I would just say thank you again to Christine for being here, for everyone for joining and being part of the conversation. I think this has sparked some good dialogue, good discussion. And yeah, we appreciate you all spending about an hour of your day with us.
Thanks, everyone. It's warming up in Fairbanks. The ice fog's going away. It's a miracle. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you very much.